Okay, Jason, I made the introductions, so we're ready to go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mentioned that it took us a few hours last night to get everything cooking, and Jason was, thank God, very patient and was a great deal of help.
Thank you to the both of you.
Okay, I wanted to ask you one question before we get going. Can you take
Sure.
you want to take questions during or after?
After might be better, only unless, or maybe George, maybe you could stop me and if somebody's got a question. It's just the give and take might be a little tricky because I can't see anybody in the audience and there's a delay and all of that. I don't know, it might be better to do it at the end.
Okay, okay. Try to keep your questions until after.
Now I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Can't hear you now.
Oh, because I muted. Because
Yeah.
when you're speaking, I've got to mute it,
I see.
so there's no feedback.
Right.
Okay. So I have to remember, I have to do more than one thing at a time here.
Let's
Could be
have me do
difficult.
a quick presentation on what's coming with Mavericks, and then I'm happy to take questions. That's probably better than me just talking and then vanishing.
Can you get rid of yours?
All right, I'll get started then. So interesting day to talk about Mavericks. I want to at least mention iOS 7 is coming out today too, and we set this up in advance. I didn't actually realize that was going to happen, but the new version of iOS running on let's see, iPhone 4 and later, and iPad 2 and later is going to come out probably in an hour and a half or so. It's very different from the previous version. I like it a lot, but it's very different. And if you don't have some need to upgrade right now, I would say wait and see what the initial reports are and if people are finding bugs and all that. But I like it a lot. It's very different. It looks different, but I think it's pretty good. Anyway, this is not about iOS 7. This is about Mavericks. Mavericks is the next version of OS 10. It's coming out this fall. Fall starts in 3 days, but I suspect that it's going to be sometime in October, probably late October when we see it. It's macOS 10, 10.9. We don't know what the price is going to be for the upgrade, but Apple's been dropping upgrade prices. I'd be shocked if it's more than $20, and it might even be free. So with all these OS 10 versions, and Apple's basically updating OS 10 once a year now, there are a bunch of new features that I wanted to at least mention, things that are going to be different with Mavericks. This is also the first non-uncapped release of OS 10. The Mavericks is the name of a beach south of San Francisco, a famous surfing. It's not even a beach, it's a famous surfing spot. It's off the beach, about a mile. And from now on, apparently all OS 10 versions are going to be named for California place names. So who knows what's next? OS 10 Big Sur, OS 10 Muir Woods, we just don't know. So let me run through, before I take your questions, let me run through an overview of what's new in Mavericks. Support for multiple displays. I have a big Thunderbolt display here in my office, and then I also have a laptop screen that I often keep open. If you've got more than one screen, whether it's a laptop and an external monitor or two monitors, the multiple display support is much better. I find this very exciting. You can put an app on one display into full screen mode, and you can still work on the other display. In previous versions of OS 10 that supported full screen mode, one of your screens would be full of your app and the other one would be sort of a nice linen texture and nothing else, which isn't very helpful. So that's much better. You can have different, if you're thinking about mission control or what used to be called spaces, you can actually have different spaces on separate screens, so you can have your two screens kind of work independently of each other. And there's a menu bar on both screens for the first time. So if you've got two big screens and you always have to think, oh gosh, I gotta go all the way back over there because that's where my menu bar is, and then come back over here where my app is, you don't have to do that anymore either. The menu bar follows you around. And in some cases, the dock will follow you around too. So if you've got a couple of big screens that you're used to working with, it's actually going to be much, much better now. The Finder has changed a lot in Mavericks. The big changes are you can put the Finder in full screen mode if you want to. It's kind of overkill, I think, for most people, but you can if you want to. the Finder has tabs, so you can do, like in Safari, if you hit Command T, you will open a new tab, and you can have a window with multiple tabs in it, each viewing a different part of the Finder. So you could have like your Dropbox folder in one window, and your desktop folder in another window, or another tab, and your applications folder in another tab. And you can drag files between them. You drag a file up into the tab, it switches to that tab, and then you drag it out. And behavior is very similar to what you see in Safari. It does mean that if you're somebody who likes the setting where, sort of like in the classic Mac days, you double click on a folder and it opens a new window, which was a setting you could set in the Finder, that setting is gone, and now your options are to open it in the same window, which has been there since the beginning of OS X, or open it in a new tab. As somebody who loves opening new windows in the Finder, I find this kind of sad. There's a shortcut that's not that short. If you right-click and you can choose open a new window, that'll still work. And I imagine somebody's going to write a utility that, or there'll be a secret preference that'll change it. But anyway, it does reduce window clutter quite a lot to have your Finder behave like Safari and have tabs instead of a bunch of separate open windows. Another big change that is most prominent in the Finder, but it's actually in most open and save windows, is this ability to add tags to files. When you save a new file, it doesn't just ask for your file name anymore. It actually asks you to put in tags. And tags are basically little, ideally one-word descriptors of what this file is about. And the idea there is that you can organize your documents not just based on their name or what folder they're in, or even their contents, searching with Spotlight, but you can apply tags to them. So you could create a tag for a project. I created a tag for my Mavericks stories that was the Mavericks tag, and every file I saved about Mavericks, I tagged it as Mavericks, and then later I could go in the Finder and I could search, or actually even in the sidebar of the Finder, there's a list of tags. I could click on the Mavericks tag and it would automatically show me all of the Mavericks tagged files. So the idea there is that Apple wants to make it so if you don't want to file your files in folders very diligently, you just want to keep them scattered or in one big folder full of all of your files, you can still have some underlying organizational structure, in this case, the tagging system. So it's not mandatory. It does sync with iCloud. It's basically the replacement for colored labels. Colored labels are tags now. So they're interoperable with previous versions. But if you're somebody who thinks in terms of tags, if that is an organizational principle that works for you, you can do that now. And I think some people who've got lots of different projects that they're working on and the files are scattered all over the place will find it valuable to tag their files this way. You can also tag files, not just when you're saving them, but out in the Finder, you can add tags to files. And it works similarly to adding labels in the Finder. Like I said, it syncs with iCloud, and iCloud tags are searchable too. So it all sort of works together. Let me talk about the changes in Safari. Safari's got a big update that's coming in Mavericks. I think the biggest change, it's got some under the hood changes where it's supposed to be faster. Every browser window or tab is now running in its own process, which means that if you hit a bad web page, it should crash that page and not all of Safari, and you won't lose all your other windows, which is nice. Apple's been working on that stuff for a long time, and it's getting better. There's a new feature called the sidebar in Safari that is a combination. You can display bookmarks there. You can display the reading list feature, which is where you save web pages to read later. You don't have time to read it now, but you want to save it for later. It's kind of like Instapaper or Pocket, which are websites and apps that let you do that. Safari's got one built in, and that's been updated. That stuff's saved to read later offline, so you don't have to be connected to read that web page that you saved to read later. There's also a really interesting view that is links from people you know on social media, and I think it's Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. If you've got those accounts, any of those accounts configured in your Mavericks account settings, this sidebar shows up and it shows you not all the posts from those services, but all the links that were posted by your friends on those services. And it's a pretty cool way to see what links people are talking about, and then follow those links into Safari, all from one window. So the links show up on the sidebar that's right next to the web pages that you're clicking on. And when you click on a link in that view, it actually shows you up at the top above the web page in Safari. There's like a little toolbar that shows you who posted that link and what they said about it among your friends. So it's kind of an interesting feature to try to surface links that you might want to click on using social networking. The other big new feature in Safari is called iCloud Keychain. It's your Mac has had a keychain for a long time and has been able to save your passwords, your Safari passwords for various websites. It asks you, do you want to save this? You say yes. There are a bunch of add-on products like 1Password that do this and have more features, but Apple has offered a password saving tool for a while. The big difference is iCloud Keychain will sync with iCloud, so instead of it just being on your Mac, it will sync to any other Mac or iOS device running iOS 7. And so what that means is you go to a website, you generate a password for it. Apple iCloud Keychain will actually offer to create a password for you and remember it, and it'll be a complicated, lots of random letters and numbers password, so a strong password that's not going to be guessed. You don't have to use that, but it'll offer. And then once you set your password, it'll save it. Not only will your Mac remember it, so if you come back to that site later, it will prompt you, do you want to enter in the password here? But when you're running iOS 7, and your passwords will sync to your iPhone or iPad running iOS 7, and it will offer those passwords on those devices too. And that'll be really great because currently iPhones and iPads don't remember your passwords very well. And this way your passwords will be synced automatically and remembered across all of your Apple devices, which I think is pretty exciting. Let's see, what else? Notification Center, which was introduced in Mountain Lion, which is that little button on the far right of the menu bar that makes the little notification list slide out. It's gotten better. The organization system is better. You will be able to subscribe to websites using Notification Center. So if you go to, NewYorkTimes.com or CNN.com or anything like that, if those sites are going to be able to push updates to you. They have to build it in. It's actually the same system that's used to push notifications to iPhones and iPads from apps. But websites are going to be able to push those notifications to your Mac too. So that's a nice, interesting new feature. And I think the most exciting new feature of Notification Center is that those little bubbles that pop up to warn you about you've got a new message, you've got a new email, are interactive now. If somebody sends you an iMessage, you don't have to have the Messages app open. A little bubble will pop up, and one of the buttons will be reply, and you can actually reply to that message in the bubble and hit return, and then get on with your work. And you never actually have to open the app to have a conversation. You can also, when you get a new email message, you can click Read Message, and it'll automatically open it in Mail. And you can actually click Delete, and it will get rid of that message if that's a message that's just junk and you don't want to see it. You can also send iMessages from Notification Center now. If you click on the little Notification Center thing and it slides out, you already had the option to send a Twitter post or a Facebook post, and now you can also have the option of sending a message to someone. So if you want to send a quick message to someone saying, I'll be there in 10 minutes, you can do that and don't have to actually use the Messages app at all. Let's see, what else? Power Nap I wanted to talk about. This is, there are a whole bunch of energy saving features in Mavericks. Apple says that all laptops that upgrade to Mavericks will get battery life improvements, and some of that is the software being more efficient and trying to find ways to use less power. Some of it is also being smarter about how it uses different apps. So if an app is hidden behind a window, that app won't run. It'll temporarily be suspended as long as it isn't doing work if it's just sitting there. So you've got a browser window in front of another browser window. That rear browser window will pause. It won't be playing animations and things. It'll pause, and that saves power. But the biggest thing is that app developers are going to be able to add even more support for this thing called Power Nap, where basically they go to sleep, they don't use very much power, And then they can also wake up at certain times, even when your computer is asleep, and perform some tasks. So when you do flip your MacBook Air back open, things will be ready right where you left it. And they're trying to really make this something that's very energy efficient, but also feels more like an iPad or an iPhone, where when you turn it off, it's off, and you turn it back on, and everything is right where you left it, already updated and ready to go. So I've been using Mavericks for a little while now, and I think there are some improvements to battery life, and then of course the new MacBook Airs have huge battery improvements too. So you combine those two, and you can be looking at computers with, that 13-inch MacBook Air you can probably use for 12 straight hours and not have a problem. Kind of amazing. The apps that ship with OS X are being updated for Mavericks. So Apple Mail is faster. It's a little buggy in the betas that I've been using. It doesn't work quite right with Gmail, but I anticipate they'll fix that before it's ready to go in a month. But it's way faster. I'd open a message that was in a long email thread of 15 or 20 messages, and I would click on it, and it would sit there in Mountain Lion and wait while it processed them all and showed them all together. And in Mavericks, it just opens. It's much faster and much more efficient and things like that. And the calendar app, which we used to call iCal, but is officially called Calendar, I still can't stop calling it iCal, has a nicer design. They famously, I think, dropped the leather stitching and things like that from it. It doesn't look like it's made out of leather anymore. But it's also got a lot of nice interface touches, the little floating windows that pop up you can do more with. You can set locations for meetings. There's integration with Apple Maps, and it will actually estimate how long it will take for you to get from one meeting to another. You can put in travel time and block out travel time, so you're not just saying I have a meeting here and then a meeting there, and not having the space that you need to make between those two meetings to get from one of them to the other. That's all built in, as well as just being able to put in a location of your meeting and getting a map saying this is where it is. I believe that syncs with iOS 7 too, so iOS 7 has those locations, and will say things like, it'll take 20 minutes to get to your next meeting, which is useful if you're standing somewhere with your iPhone wondering when you need to leave. There's also a new Maps app that is like the Maps app in iOS 6 on the iPhone and iPad, so you can look at all of Apple's map data and driving directions and traffic information right on the Mac. That was a feature that was just missing. It was on iPads and iPhones, but not on the Mac. And there's a new iBooks app, which is the first time that you've been able to read iBooks on the Mac. And I know we do a line of ebooks at Macworld, and this was a common complaint, was that it wasn't available on the Mac, that you couldn't read these books on the Mac. And that was more Apple's problem than our problem. We were just making the standard book format, but finally Apple will let you buy their iBooks, but also read iBooks on the Mac. So if you've got a laptop and you want to read a book on there and you don't have an iPad, or you don't want to read a book on the iPad, and I know there are lots of people who actually feel that way, you can do that now. The iBooks is going to be on the Mac, and it's going to support the special sort of high-quality interactive books that previously only worked on the iPad that were created using Apple's iBooks Author tool. So a lot of really rich books. If you remember, there was an event where Apple talked a lot about textbooks. Those are the super multimedia textbooks that are built using Apple's tools. All of that stuff is going to be viewable on the Mac now for the first time. And I only have a couple other highlights I wanted to mention. One is dictation. Apple introduced dictation, sort of iOS-style dictation, where you could press a couple of keys and then just speak, and at the end, when you would stop, and it would figure it out, and it would put in the text. There are some improvements to that. There's a new version of that doesn't require an internet connection. It downloads a few hundred megabytes of data, but then you can be offline, and it will still listen to your dictation and turn it into typed speech or typed text. But I think more impressively than that, it will also give you feedback if you turn that feature on and you start talking. Instead of just seeing a little kind of circle that's waiting for you to stop, you will see your words actually start to stream as you talk, which for me is a big difference. Having that feedback of the words I've already said are down on the page, instead of still having to keep track of where I started this sentence, I think is really useful. So that's a big upgrade for dictation. It's never going to be the same as using a high-end dictation program like the ones from Nuance, like Drag and Dictate, but it's pretty good, and it just comes with the operating system. And then the last point I wanted to mention is auto-updating. We already knew that Apple would push out automatic updates of software, to operating system software. You can now set the system to automatically update your apps that you bought from the Mac App Store. So instead of having to open the App Store, getting a little notification that says you have updates in the App Store, and clicking on Update All or individually choosing apps, you can set a setting that says Update my apps automatically. This is actually the same setting that's in iOS 7. So if you want to let Apple just automatically upgrade all your apps to the latest versions, you set that setting and it'll just do it in the background. So you'll launch a new app, or you'll launch an old app and suddenly it's a new version because that version came out in the Mac App Store, and it'll do that now in the background if you want it to. And of course it's optional, it doesn't have to. Okay, that's my quick overview of what's in Mavericks. So I'm ready for any questions that you guys have about Mavericks or iOS 7 or pretty much anything Apple related that you want.
Anything, Jason just said anything Apple related, so you can take advantage of our opportunity to speak to Jason and ask any question. Okay.
Jason, I have two short ones. Number one, I've been listening with amusement for over 10 years as OS 10 comes out as 10.8, 10.9. What has to happen until it becomes OS 11? And the second one is, what percentage of battery increase can I expect with Mavericks? 10% more, 20% more?
So, second question first. It's hard to tell because the battery tuning kind of happens in the process. It's hard to say. I've been testing it. It seems like it's better, but it's tricky because Apple is tuning the battery stuff and the power stuff in Mavericks. And then apps will be updated to take advantage of it. And not all of those have been updated yet because Mavericks isn't going to be out for a month. So it seems like it's better, but it's really hard to tell how much better. And I'm not sure we're going to get a really good idea of how much better for probably until like a month after Mavericks comes out. After all the software has been updated, I think we'll get a better idea. I do think it will be better because they're doing some really smart things to save power. I don't think it's going to be like getting a whole new computer with twice the battery life, but I do think that the battery life will be better by, my guess, 10%, 20%, maybe somewhere in there, but depends on what apps you use, for one, and whether they've been updated and whether they can take advantage of some of the power savings. And then what Apple's doing in this last month before release to make the stuff better. Because, these beta releases are all over the map. They're not ready, and they're not always finished tweaking all the little details that are going to be necessary. To answer your first question about OS 11, I feel like OS 10 is just the brand name they're using now, and they are happy with it. So I would not be shocked if we see next year OS 10.10, OS 10X 10.10. I also wouldn't be surprised if what we see is OS X 10 11.0, and it's still called OS 10 version 11. Because I feel like OS 10 is basically the brand name, and unless the only other option I think would be that they would just call it something like Mac OS, and get the 10 out of the name and just kind of go back. It's Mac OS. Let's just go back to calling it Mac OS as the brand name. But I don't know. They recently changed it so it's not Mac OS 10 anymore. It's OS 10, which is weird because the Mac name isn't in it anymore. So I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. I don't think we'll see an OS 11. I think though it'll either be OS 10 version 11, OS 10 10.10, which doesn't make sense decimal wise, but it's a software version. So who cares? Or they'll rebrand it as something entirely different. But I doubt it will be 11 because I don't think 11 is as catchy as 10. So that's my opinion anyway.
Vicky.
Regarding the keychain password that's now saved in iCloud, is it also saved?
You muted me, George. I can't hear her now.
Start all over again.
Regarding the keychain password, which is synced with iCloud and all your devices, is it also saved in the local folder on all of your devices? And if so, phone, how secure is that folder?
Good question. It's so on the Mac, it's in the keychain. It actually is the system keychain that's existed for ages, actually even back to OS 9 days. It's in there. On iOS, it's in the it's in the system settings, so it's only as secure as your device is. Basically, 1Password, which is what I use, it requires a password every time you access it. This isn't that secure. The security is in the device. So, if you're concerned about somebody using these passwords on your devices, you should lock your device with a passcode. Or if you buy the iPhone 5S, I suppose, with your fingerprint, or a passcode, either way. But once it's unlocked, it works. There's no second password. There's no second security measure that you need to unlock those things. I think it's unfortunate. I wish Apple would allow you to have a keychain automatically lock after a certain period of time. You can actually do that on the Mac with regular keychains, but not with iCloud keychain. It doesn't let you set an auto lock after a certain period of time. So really, you have to be comfortable with the idea that you're going to set your Mac, if you're worried about this, to set your Mac with a password and set it to time out and lock itself after 5 minutes. And set your iOS devices with a password if you're concerned. But there's no extra layer of security. If you want that extra layer of security, what I recommend is using 1Password, which is available on the Mac and on iOS, and is great. The only problem with 1Password is that it's not integrated in Safari on iOS, and iCloud Keychain is, which is really convenient, way more convenient than 1Password can be. But you give up some security when you do that.
Thank you. I do use 1Password, and that is the problem with it. That's why I wondered about the new one. Never mind.
Next question. I can't hear.
I'm a little confused. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm a little confused when you say it's not integrated with Safari.
Right. So iCloud Keychain, if you're in Safari and you go to a website that says please log in, it will autofill the username and password for you because it's in the keychain in Safari, and you just press log in and you're logged in. 1Password is a third-party app, so if I get to that point and I'm using 1Password instead of iCloud Keychain, I have to switch to 1Password, look up my password, copy my password, switch back to Safari, paste my password, and press login. It's way more secure, but it's way less convenient. On the Mac, 1Password has a browser plugin, so I'm in Safari and I click on the little link and put in my password and it autofills. But they can't do that. They don't have access to that in iOS Safari. So that's the advantage iCloud Keychain has, is it's built into Safari on iOS. And 1Password just isn't. So that's the trade-off. Is 1Password is more secure in a lot of ways than iCloud Keychain. And I'm using iCloud Keychain for a lot of things just because I do have passcodes on my phone and I do have passcodes on my Mac. And my iPad is basically never somewhere where security is a problem. But that's a personal decision everybody has to make. iCloud Keychain, though, is way more convenient on the iPhone and iPad than 1Password. It's just less secure.
George?
Jared.
A follow-up on your discussion on iCloud password. 1Password has the advantage in a Mac that you can use it with other browsers. If you're on an iOS device, does iCloud password work with, I guess there are no other browsers in an iOS device.
That's a really good question. I don't know the answer. The keychain access. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not sure whether Apple is letting other browsers on the Mac. I'm pretty sure that Apple lets other browsers access the keychain, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether it'll work or not. They're all using the same web view, basically interface. It may, I think that's unclear. It may work, it may not. In the long run, it probably will, but it may not be with iOS 7. So I think it's kind of an either or. If you're using Chrome, for example, you probably want to use Chrome Password Sync and use that on your desktop and that on your laptop. But yeah, I think not. I think iCloud Keychain probably doesn't work, but I haven't confirmed it out of the box in third-party browsers. I need to look into that. That's a great question, but my guess would be no at first, and then maybe eventually later.
Any more questions? Marilyn?
Do you think when they bring out the new iPad, it's going to have the fingerprint ID?
I had somebody ask me that just the other day. It wouldn't surprise me. I think it's less important on an iPad than it is on an iPhone, just because iPads are a little less portable. But I don't know, if I had to guess, I would say it's probably going to be on the iPad, the full-size iPad, and maybe not on the iPad mini. I do think it'll be everywhere eventually, but like the iPad mini, I think Apple wants to have that price stay pretty low, and the more high-tech stuff it puts in there, the more expensive it's going to be. It would surprise me less if it was on the iPad 4, I think, or iPad 5. I think that might happen. I'm being blocked by a box. So that's my guess, but I don't know. My guess would be if it's anywhere, it'll probably be on the full-size iPad, and it might not come until next year, but I don't know.
More questions? There's got to be some more questions here.
George, I had one.
Yeah, Jared.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. You mentioned in the notification center to subscribe to websites. Is that basically a replacement for RSS, which Apple has dropped?
It's different from RSS, but it's sort of a replacement in the sense it's not going to push everything. I think the idea there is it's like alerts, like news alerts. A website could push every single article it posts. It probably won't. It'll probably push a smaller number than that, like breaking news updates or things like that. It's unclear exactly. People can use it sort of however they want. I think there's a rate limit. I think there's only a certain number of pushes you can do per hour. But it's only the headlines. It's not the content. It's sort of a replacement for some aspect of RSS, but it's not a full replacement for RSS. And if you're somebody who is an RSS fan, you're still going to have to use third-party RSS reader. So it's really more like, think of it like a push notification on an iPad app, like the New York Times app pushes when there's a big bit of breaking news, but it's only once a day or every other day. I imagine most sites will use it like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
With the iOS 7 and Mavericks.
Right.
Oh, you hear me?
You can start all over again.
With iOS 7 and Mavericks, when you delete an app, can you really delete it so it goes away rather than reappearing?
Reappearing. Do you mean the Apple installed apps?
Any app you may download. Let's say I decide that I don't want this calculator anymore, and I delete it from my iOS device. What I find is it will reappear or update in such a way that it comes back on the device again.
That's not supposed to happen. So I've got two things. One is if it's an Apple app, you can't delete it. So that's still true. So the Stylist app will remain hidden away in a folder at the back of my system. But mostly what you're describing sounds like an iTunes syncing issue where you're deleting it on the phone or the iPad, and then iTunes is syncing apps, and iTunes says, oh, you should take this app back. And I haven't tested a lot of the iTunes syncing. I don't sync apps with iTunes anymore. I just use the device and it does the automatic updating and I don't sync it. So if my best troubleshooting advice is see about not syncing your device apps, plug it into a Mac using iTunes that you use to maybe sync things if you do, and uncheck the sync apps box if you can. If it doesn't say, I will delete all your apps if I do this, but that's my guess is that things are reappearing because you're deleting them on the iPad and then iTunes is trying to put them back on there. The other approach would be delete it on your iPad or your iPhone and then go to your iTunes computer and delete it on there in the apps list in iTunes, and then it won't have it to try and resync it. But that's the only way I can think where you'd have something that was actually deleted and then reappear that I know of would be an iTunes sync problem.
We have another question.
Yes, on fingerprints. I understand that the fingerprints are saved in an encrypted file, and that sounds very good. If somebody steals my password, I can always come up with a new one. If, however, somebody steals my encrypted file and reads it, I can never replace my finger, and my fingers, will probably be useful in all kinds of applications as life goes on. What would be your comment to that question or concern?
Yes, my fingers are precious to me too. And what I would say is it's an issue. Apple says that it's not actually storing your password, it's storing data, or storing your fingerprint. It's storing some data based on unique characteristics of your fingerprint, so it's not the whole fingerprint. I guess I would also say that we do leave our fingerprints everywhere. If you touch a glass or something like that, they're not in the cloud, but they are around. So there are lots of issues with fingerprints. It's not ideal, it's not perfect. The way Apple's implemented this, we'll have to see what the hackers do and what they figure out. The way that Apple has implemented this is, like I said, it's not storing the actual fingerprint, it's taking unique characteristics, excuse me, of the fingerprint. And from that, it's generating an encrypted key. It's basically what they call a hash. So basically, it's data that can be compared to the fingerprint and match it, but it can't reverse engineer the fingerprint from it. Your passwords are generally stored the same way. The sites that you visit and you save a password, they don't actually store your password. They store an encrypted blob that then you give them the password and they can convert your password into the blob and they look at them and say they match. So they don't actually know your password except for that moment where it's comparing it. So that's part of this. And then it's not just stored in an encrypted file. It's actually stored in this what they call an enclave within Apple, the A7 processor. So they've created this secure. It's actually like a virtual chip inside the chip. There's the chip, and then the chip can pretend to be. It's got two modes. It's got a secure mode and an insecure mode. Apps can't talk to it. It can only pass things through a very narrow kind of pipe where it basically says, you can give me something and I can nod back. I can give you a basic answer back, but you don't get to see what I know. So, according to the stuff that I've read, it's really remarkably engineered to be secure, and nothing gets put up in the cloud. It's all resident on the device. So you would need, there would need to be a lot of hacking and physically stealing your phone and potentially cutting off your finger. Although the Apple says dead fingers won't work. It has to be a live finger. So what I'd say is it sounds like they're doing the right thing, but let's let the security community poke at it a little bit when it comes out and see if they find flaws in it. I do think, and several security researchers have written about this, I do think it would be nice if they would let you turn on what's called two-factor authorization, where you had to show your fingerprint and put in a little code, because then you need to know both. You need to have your finger and know the code. But then you need a fallback if the fingerprint sensor failed, which would probably be a much more complex password. It's early days yet, so I feel like Apple's doing the right things, but only the security researchers are going to be able to tell us if they pulled it off. And I anticipate that we'll find that out in the next probably the next few weeks, certainly the next few months.
I ask another question. If the contents of an iPhone becomes a matter of national security, and someone has to act very quickly, like the CIA or the NSA, there must be a way somehow for us to be protected. I mean, so my question is, some people in this country should have access in the ultimate case of an emergency. Or is there such a way?
Well, fingerprint-wise, every iPhone 5S that has a fingerprint code also has the passcode. So, there are passwords. And if you believe the stories, the NSA has backdoors or has found security vulnerabilities for all the major computing platforms, including iOS and macOS. So it's possible that, I'd imagine they've got a system that can suck the contents of your iPhone out and then brute force attack your passwords and get to encrypted information. Whether they could get to your fingerprint metadata inside that secure enclave, I think, is an open question. My guess is that the NSA might be able to get to your fingerprints. If they can get your phone, they can probably get your fingerprint off the screen. But the data inside is still just encrypted computer data, and I'd say that the story there is no different than any other computing device, including your Mac or a PC or an Android phone or anything else, where if they can get your physical phone, the NSA probably has some pretty strong brute force methods to get at the data inside. And most phone and computer security is not meant for that. It's meant for more casual, I don't want my coworkers reading my email, I don't want a robber to take my phone and be able to look at my credit cards, things like that, not spycraft and national security stuff, where I think it's a very different thing. And if you're interested in national security and spycraft information, the people who've got that kind of information are not, they're using a computer that's not on the internet and has never been on the internet and will never be on the internet and things like that, because they know that that any computer that's on the internet can be compromised. Anyway, so I don't think it's a big change.
Marilyn? Wait a minute.
Someone had put out a notice on our discussion group about not converting to iOS 7 on some of the older devices, such as the iPad 2s and some of the older phones. What do you know about that?
I think it's wise to be wary. In the past, new versions of iOS have run on older devices that were at the limit of the compatibility, and they did it slowly, and people weren't happy with it. So I think it's worth waiting if you're using an iPhone 4 or an iPad 2, just to see what the reports are. And we'll try that here. I know we're going to try it. I haven't tried it on a 4 or an iPad 2, and I will, because I'm curious to see what the reports are and what the results are. But that's always a concern. So if you've got one of those older systems, I would wait. I would probably wait anyway, just because there may be bugs. It's new. I've been using it for a while now. I think it's pretty solid, but different people in different configurations may have different results. I think the iPhone version is way more stable than the iPad version. So if you are going to upgrade to iOS 7, I think I might recommend the iPhone first and maybe wait a little bit on the iPad. But if you're using iPhone 4 or an iPad 2, I would wait and see what the reports are, because that was the feeling I think when iOS 5 came out, is that it ran on the iPhone 3G, but it was so slow as to be almost unusable. And people were talking about how they could downgrade back to the previous iOS, and that could happen again. So let's wait and see. I think that's good advice.
Yes, next question.
For some reason, I have Firefox on my computer, and all my other devices now have Safari. Should I change? Is there any reason to change?
It's a personal preference thing. My wife used Firefox for a long time. I think she's using Chrome now. She just likes it better than Safari. If you upgrade everything, and iCloud Keychain is out there, you might want to use that. You could also use Chrome on your Mac and download the Chrome app for iOS and use that on iOS too. And there's some data syncing that happens between different versions of Chrome on the different operating systems. But I'd say it's a personal preference thing. I use Safari most of the time, but Chrome is fine. I don't think I would recommend Firefox at this point. I think Chrome has surpassed it. So if you want an alternative to Safari, I would say give Chrome a try. And also give Safari a try and see if you like it any better than you did. But Safari should be on your Mac as it is. And then Chrome is out at, I think it's google.com/Chrome if you want to give it a try.
Any other questions? I have a question. Anything new and exciting in your world, the magazines?
New and exciting in our world, yes. So
Mike?
I'm in charge of PC World and Mac World, and we actually just took PC World out of print. It's now digital only. There's a really nice iPad version of it, and then we've got a sort of more flat version of it too that will work anywhere. It's exciting and it's the future. Macworld is still in print, which is great. And as far as I know, I think we're talking about a budget for next year. There are no plans in taking it out of print at this time. Maybe I think inevitably everything is going out of print to digital. But Macworld, the magazine, is still doing pretty well on paper. And then we also have a really nice tablet edition on the iPad that all subscribers get access to. So if you're a Macworld subscriber and you haven't tried out the iPad edition, you might want to give it a try. You get access as a part of your subscription to that in addition to the paper version. That's the big news. Is that we took PC World out of paper. Macworld's still there in paper. And then last year we launched a new site called Tech Hive, which is trying to cover tech a little more broadly than Mac or PC and cover, digital entertainment and streaming and Netflix and social media and Android and Windows Phone and iOS too. So busy times here. But that's sort of my Macworld update. Macworld's still around, still kicking, still doing pretty well. And then the tablet edition, if you haven't checked it out and you're a Macworld reader, I would encourage you to do that. It's in the App Store. The Macworld Digital Magazine, I think is what the app is called.
George?
We have another question.
What do you know about the upgrades to Apple TV?
I know nothing. What I will say, a Mavericks feature I didn't mention, is that there's going to be an update to Apple TV that supports Mavericks when it comes out. And you can use AirPlay, which is the ability to put your computer screen up on your TV via Apple TV. Currently, it will mirror your computer's display. In Mavericks, you can use it as a full-on second display, like you plugged in your TV to your Mac as an external monitor, except it's all wireless via the Apple TV. Beyond that, we don't really know. I don't have any advanced information about that. We're all just sort of wait for Apple TV updates to drop and see what happens. There are rumors that there's going to be a new Apple TV, but that it's going to be just another one of those little boxes with some slight upgrades. And that's really all I know. I don't really know a lot beyond that, other than the Mavericks will make Apple TV mirroring way better, because it'll not be mirroring anymore. It'll be a full external display for your Mac that's over on your TV set.
Is Tech Hive is only digital, correct?
Right. There's no magazine for Tech Hive yet. We talked about doing an app magazine or something like that, but for now, it's a website only, techhive.com.
Was there much negative feedback when you made that change with the PC?
It was not as bad as I thought. I think we expected to end up with something like 60,000 subscribers and refund, 20 or 30 or 40% of the people, give them their money back. And in the end, we ended up with more than 130,000 subscribers, and there were fewer than 9% refunds. So people really seem to be fine with it. Less than 10% said, I don't want it digital, I only want it on paper, give me my money back. And I think that's good. That surprised me. So it went pretty well. Now, what I keep telling my editors is the next trick is we got to keep them happy. They said, all right, we'll go along with this. we need to give them something that they are going to like enough to renew when it gets time to renew. So we'll see how that goes. But so far, so good.
We have a member who has just had her 95th birthday, and she would like to know what the price of the Apple stock will be at her 100th birthday.
In 5 years, will we still have a stock market, or will it been evolved into something completely different? I don't know. Stock. I'm not actually allowed to own Apple stock, so I don't pay that much attention to it. And I'm not sure Apple stock behaves rationally. It seems like when it goes up when I don't understand why it's going up, and it goes down when I don't understand why it's going down. I think in the end, Apple has so much money and so much momentum, though, that it's going to continue to be a successful business in 5 years. Where the price is, I don't know, but I would think it would be pretty good, because I think Apple has got. If you look at Microsoft and how badly Microsoft has done in the last decade, and yet they still make huge amounts of money and are very successful. And then you compare that to Apple. How bad would Apple have to do for how long before it would have any trouble at all? And I think it's not doing badly; it's doing very well. So, but I can't give a price.
We have another question. Another question.
Have you heard anything about a 17-inch Mac laptop?
I've heard a lot from people who ask about it, but if I had to guess, I don't think there will be one. It's possible, but I don't know. I don't feel like Apple really believes in that market. I don't know. It's possible. I think the 15-inch Retina is about as big as it's going to get for Apple laptops. It would be my guess. I could be proven wrong, but I wouldn't put money on there being a 17-inch MacBook Pro again. Anything is possible, but the fact that it's sort of gone away, I'm not too positive. Then again, I wasn't positive about an 11-inch laptop, and they went back there, so it's possible. But I think the trend with Apple is smaller, and that the 15-inch Retina may be the new workhorse.
Anything new staff-wise in your, any new writers or any?
No, not a lot new right now. No, Lex Friedman took a job full-time somewhere else, but he's still going to write for us on the side. We'll miss him being here full-time. Otherwise, it's the same old cast of characters for now. So,
Any other questions? Jason, thank you very, very much.